Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. My name is Ariel Feldman, and I'm the director of the Jewish Studies program at Brite Divinity School and Texas Christian University. Welcome to this lecture. I'm very pleased to welcome all of you to yet another lecture supported by Lewis and Frieda Cristol Endowment for Academic Programming in Jewish Studies. Our special guest today is Professor Sara Ronis. Professor Ronis earned her Ph.D. in Judaism Late Antiquity from Yale University, and she serves as an associate professor of theology at St. Mary's University in San Antonio. Professor Ronis specializes in the literature and thought of rabbinic Judaism, and she published extensively on a variety of topics related to the rabbinic culture. Her recent book, Demons in the Details, what a title, has won the 2023 Canadian Jewish Literature Award. And this happens to be the topic of her presentation to us today, Rabbis and Demons in the Talmud. As you listen to her presentation, please consider posting a question or remark. Please use Q&A function of the webinar or the chat, or simply email it to me, whatever you would like to do. I'm posting my email in the chat right now. I'll monitor your questions and present some of your wonderful ideas and questions to our speaker's presentation after she is done with the PowerPoint and the speaking. Now, this is the moment for us to welcome Professor Ronis. Professor Ronis, welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you to Professor Feldman. Thank you to the Lewis and Frieda Cristol Endowment for Academic Programming in Jewish Studies at Brite. And thank you all for coming out on a random Tuesday afternoon. So I want to start with a question. My question is, do Jews believe in demons? And I'm not going to, call on anyone or make you put something in the chat. But whenever I ask this question to rooms, I'll usually get about half of the audience raise their hand and say, "Yeah, I think Jews do believe in demons," and half of the audience will say, "No, I'm actually not. I don't think. Maybe I don't know." And so today I want to explore both of those impulses with you. So in the first half of today's talk, we're going to explore some of the classic Jewish texts which show very clearly how at least some Jews in some time periods believed in demons. And in the second part of today's talk, we're going to turn to look at the texts that explain why so many people today think that Jews don't believe in demons. And there are really good reasons for that. Ultimately, what I want to leave you with is this. Yes, some Jews in some times and places believe in demons. And not only that, but their approach to demons is creative, rigorous, and theologically important. Right? I know this is through Brite Divinity School. We spend a lot of time thinking about theology, and we'll see the ways that a belief in demons can be really theologically important. It turns out we can learn a lot about people by looking at their demons and at how and why those demons disappear. So I started thinking about demons when I was a grad student. I was studying Judaism in late antiquity with a focus on the Babylonian Talmud. And the Babylonian Talmud is the classic work of the rabbis of late antiquity. Oh, see, here's what we were going to do. That was my plan. All right. The Babylonian Talmud is the classic work of the rabbis of late antiquity. The rabbis, today you think rabbi, you think head of a Jewish congregation or a synagogue. The rabbis in late antiquity were a Jewish scholastic elite who lived in the land of Israel in the province of Roman Palestine. So if you look at my cursor, you can see right over here on the border. And they also lived in Babylonia, which was a province of the Sasanian Empire. And you can see that right here where my cursor is. And between the 3rd and 6th centuries CE, the rabbis of Babylonia authored and redacted an enormous literary work called the Babylonian Talmud. The Babylonian Talmud is a compilation of legal discussions, stories, biblical interpretation, and jurisprudence. Some of its teachings are anonymous, others are attributed to identifiable individuals or schools of thought. And in the Talmud, the rabbis engaged in back and forth discussions over basically every aspect of Jewish life in Babylonia. And if you've ever studied the Babylonian Talmud, you know that there's a lot of talk of demons. They're kind of all over the Talmud. And the more I studied, the more I realized that demons were doing some really interesting things within rabbinic law and theology. And that turned into a PhD dissertation. And then with substantial more work, it became my first book, as Professor Feldman has noted, Demons in the Details. Because what I found is that demons are a really important lens through which to see how different communities think about good and evil, the nature of God, and how to be a person in a world that doesn't always work the way you think it should. And because so many different religious communities believed in demons, they're also a great way to see how and when different groups interact with each other, sometimes sharing beliefs, and sometimes subtly or not so subtly disagreeing with each other. So I want to start our demonic journey today by looking at 4 fascinating texts about demons in the Babylonian Talmud. And if you have a picture of demons in your head, these texts are going to turn it upside down in some really surprising ways. So let's start with the text from Tractate Psachim, which is the volume of the Talmud that discusses the Jewish holiday of Passover. Now, Passover celebrates the Israelites' liberation from enslavement in Egypt, and it does so with particular rituals, foods, and prayers. In Tractate Psachim, the Babylonian Talmud spends a lot of time thinking about the rules of Passover, what you can eat, what you can't eat, what you can own, what you can't own, and what to do on the ritual meal on the first night of Passover, which today we call a Passover Seder. A key component of the Passover Seder is drinking 4 cups of wine. Anyone who's ever been to a Seder probably has had some experience drinking 4 cups of wine. You may or may not remember it, but you probably did. The rabbis of the Talmud are very detail-oriented. So when they say you have to drink 4 cups of wine on the first night of Passover, we should expect a lot of follow-up questions, like, what kind of wine? How big should each cup be? How much of each cup do you actually have to drink? How quickly do you need to drink each cup? And I want to be clear, the rabbis are going to eventually ask all of those questions. But the rabbi's first follow-up question to this tradition is something a little bit different, right? So the rabbinic tradition starts, we should have no fewer than 4 cups of wine. And here's how the rabbis of the Talmud follow this up. How could our rabbis institute something that would ultimately lead to danger? For surely it was taught in an earlier tradition. One should not eat in even numbers, or drink in even numbers, nor wipe oneself in even numbers, nor fulfill one's sexual needs in even numbers. Apparently, as the rabbis thought everyone knows, doing particular things an even number of times was especially dangerous. But why? The rabbi's answer to their own question reveals their rationale. Rabbi Nachman bar Yitzchak said, "It is a night that is guarded." This is a quote from Exodus. "It is a night that is guarded from the demons." Now, Rabbi Nachman's answer suggests that the danger of drinking an even number of times is somehow demonic. Something about doing actually all kinds of things an even number of times is specifically provocative and offensive to demons. And apparently, watch out if you provoke a demon. Now let me take a giant step back for a minute. Basically, everyone in the ancient Mediterranean and Near East believed in demons. People thought demons were real, often physical beings that had more power than humans and less power than gods, and could and did affect human life in all kinds of ways. Mostly not great ways, to be honest. And these demons weren't metaphors. They weren't symbols for bacteria or a mental illness. So when Rav Nachman says that demons will attack you if you drink 4 cups of wine on an average night of the year, he means that literally. But not to worry, because apparently on the first night of Passover, God's self overrides demonic dangers and watches over the wine drinkers. But that's not the only rabbinic solution offered. So let's keep going. Rava said, the cup of blessing on which grace after meals is recited, which is the 3rd of the 4 cups, combines for good things, but not for bad things. Now, what Rav is essentially saying is that it's not 4 cups at all. It's actually 3 plus 1, which apparently doesn't add up to 4. Finally, Ravina, a later rabbi, said, each cup is a separate commandment, and thus they do not combine to create a total number that is either odd or even. Ravina says basically, it's not 4 cups, it's 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 cups. And those are all odd numbers. Nothing to look at here, folks. Now, let's unpack what these 3 rabbinic statements tell us about demons. According to all 3 positions, rabbinic reasoning neutralizes demonic danger. But more than that, apparently demons respect the rabbinic calendar. They know when it's the first night of Passover, and they're not to attack people who drink 4 cups of wine. They also keep up with some complicated rabbinic math, right? Most of us know 1 plus 1 usually equals 2, but apparently on the first night of Passover, 1 plus 1 doesn't equal 2 at all, and the demons get it, even if logically that math doesn't quite work out. Now, why are even numbers provocative to demons? The text doesn't say, and we don't actually have evidence for this specific belief from other nearby cultures at the time. But it's worth noting that the danger here has nothing to do with drunkenness, because one possible solution to the problem might well be drinking an extra 5th cup of wine. On behalf of your liver, I don't recommend it, but that would solve the problem of even numbers. Now, from this text, we can see that demons are invested in and part of rabbinic teaching. They know what the rabbis are doing, and as long as you follow the correct teachings, right, whether that's drinking your 4 cups on the night of Passover or making sure to drink an odd number of cups the rest of the year, they really won't harm you. But demons don't just accept rabbinic math. They also respect the rabbis. And a remarkable text in Tractate Chulin contains a story that shows just how much demons respect the rabbis. I know the font is small, so I will read, not to worry. Certain porters were once carrying a barrel of wine. Wanting to rest, they placed the barrel under a rain spout. The barrel burst. They went before Mar, son of Rav Ashi. He banned the demon. Right, so he excommunicated the demon. The demon came before Mar bar Rav Ashi and said to him, "What should I have done to those men? For they placed the barrel on my ear." Mar bar Rav Ashi said to him, "Even so, in a place where people are commonplace, you did not have the right. You acted improperly. Now go and pay for the barrel of wine." The demon said to him, "I do not have the money. Set a date on which I will pay." He set a date, but the demon did not appear. Right? He did not come on that day to pay for the barrel. When he came at a later date, Mar bar Rav Ashi said to him, "Why did you not come on time?" The demon said to him, "We have no right to take anything that is tied up, sealed, collected, or counted, so we can only take things that are in a state of ownerlessness, and thus it took me longer to collect the money." Let me unpack some of what's happening in this story for us. Certain spaces are marked as demonic. And that demarcation means that they're spaces that are usually safe for demons to occupy. This demon was not looking for human beings to attack. He was sitting quietly, in fact, so quietly that he could not be heard, minding his own business under a drain spout. It's only when the porters ignominiously place a barrel on his ear that he reacts with violence. And even then, the demon displaces the violence from the porters who've harmed him to the barrel itself. Mar bar Rav Ashi excommunicates this unnamed demon, an act which the demon resists. Though presumably the demon was originally invisible, because otherwise why would they have put a barrel where his ear was? He now literally appears before the court of Mar bar Rav Ashi to explain himself. Mar bar Rav Ashi rules that the demon should have been more aware of humans in a public space and finds him financially liable. Now, according to the logic of the narrative, the demon is a law-abiding citizen with all the rights and responsibilities that identity entails. The demon eventually resolves his perceived rejection of the court's deadline for repayment by explaining that the delay is due to his own respect for rabbinic limitations on how and what demons can take from humans. Now, the demon's presumed membership in the rabbinic community is highlighted in Mar Baravashi's initial excommunication of the demon. You cannot expel from your community someone who was never in it to begin with. And the demon's response, rushing to the court in order to defend himself, suggests that this presumption of membership in the rabbinic community is mutual. Now, if you think that's weird, let's look at one more text. And if you're used to thinking of demons as angry and malevolent, this one, I would say, is probably even weirder. Now, a little background. The rabbis of Sasanian Babylonia lived in two major rabbinic centers, in a city called Sura and in a city called Pumbedita. And Sura and Pumbedita, according to Google Maps, would take about 37 hours to walk from Sura to Pumbedita on modern roads. So 37 hours to get from Sura to Pumbedita by foot. But the rabbis have a tradition that someone taught rabbinic law in both centers on the same Sabbath. And the Jewish Sabbath, depending on how we count it, is either 24 or 25 hours. So it takes 37 hours to get from one city to the other, but somebody taught in both cities on the same Sabbath. So who could have done it? Come in here. Who was it that taught 7 legal traditions on a Sabbath morning to Rav Frieda at Sura, and on the same Sabbath evening to Rabbah at Pumbedita? Was it not Elijah the prophet who taught them? If you think back to your Hebrew Bible, Elijah the prophet gets taken up to heaven in a fiery chariot. So maybe he still has his chariot and he can rush from one city to the other, on his, really literally Hot Wheels. No, it is possible that the demon Joseph taught them. Once demons are part of the legal system, they have the freedom to excel within it and to succeed according to the rabbi's own metrics of success, Torah knowledge and religious authority. And I have found no parallels to this phenomenon in other contemporaneous cultures. Now, you might be wondering, if these creatures are at best positive members of the rabbinic movement, at worst, maybe neutral if easily provoked, right? Nobody likes having a barrel put on their ear. Should we really call them demons? So I want to turn to the way that most people think about demons today, especially if you've ever seen a horror movie, and that is exorcisms. Now, I'm going to turn here to the only rabbinic story in which a demon is exorcised from a human being. And it's not quite what you might expect if you've seen The Exorcist. And I'll be honest, I've never seen The Exorcist. I'm a chicken, but I have read a synopsis of it. So I think that this analogy stands. Now, what I want to show you here is the way that the rabbis use stories of demonic exorcism to be in conversation with the surrounding religious and ethnic groups. And when I say be in conversation with, it's worth remembering that some conversations are really pleasant and collegial, but others can be heated and angry, right? So in conversation with can mean a lot of things. Now, why is there only one story of exorcism in Babylonian rabbinic literature? I know I looked at the participant list. We have some wonderful scholars of New Testament in the crowd today, and anyone who has been lucky enough to learn from them knows that Jesus performs exorcisms all over the New Testament. And we have very much evidence that other Jews in this period also were active exorcists. The rabbis, however, don't think that demons attack by entering the body. In part because, as we've already discussed, they don't really think demons attack at all if you mostly leave them alone. But the rabbis know that not everyone in the ancient world shared their beliefs. They're a religious and political minority in both the Roman and the Sasanian empires, and they know that the majority cultures around them have different attitudes and beliefs about demons. And the rabbis tell stories that use this essential difference in demonology to make life easier for Jews. And let's look at that story together. So I'm not going to read it to you because I think there's a lot there. Let me just tell you the story, but you have it up because I know some people love the text. I love the text, but some people love to see the text. So according to this story, an unnamed Roman emperor decrees that Jews are forbidden to keep the Sabbath, to circumcise their sons, and to keep the purity laws. A small group of rabbis journey to Rome to beg the emperor to reconsider his decree. Now, according to the story, the rabbis who embark on this journey live in Roman Palestine. But the story is being told by Babylonian. It doesn't actually exist in Palestinian rabbinic literature. So we should think of this story as a Babylonian rabbinic fable or legend, not as a historical account. As the rabbis journey to Rome, they meet the demon Ben Thalamion. And together with Ben Thalamion, they come up with a plan to convince the emperor to annul his decree. Ben Thalamion uses his demonic ability to move large distances in the blink of an eye. Think Joseph the demon, right? Running from city to city. He runs ahead in a blink of an eye, ahead of the rabbis to Rome. He enters into the body of the emperor's daughter, and he refuses to leave. He essentially possesses her in a way that the Romans would recognize. The rabbis eventually arrive in Rome. It takes them a lot longer. And at this point, the emperor is distraught about his daughter's condition. He promises that anyone who can successfully exorcise his daughter can have anything they want from the imperial treasure house. At this point, the rabbis literally stage or perform an exorcism, announcing, Ben Thalamion, leave. Ben Thalamion, leave. The emperor's daughter is healed, and the rabbis go into the imperial treasure house. They take out the emperor's decree against the Jews, and they tear it up. Now, this story reads like a traditional fairy tale, but it shows us some fascinating nuances of rabbinic demonology. First, though the rabbis don't imagine that demons attack people by entering into their bodies, they do know that people believe that in the Roman West. And they're willing to play along, at least in their stories, in order to create a safe space for Jewish faith and practice. Now, second, it's worth spending a minute thinking about the demon Ben Thalamion. Ben Thalamion is not an evil demon out to cause harm. He's instead an ally of the rabbis, helping the rabbis perpetuate Jewish beliefs and traditions in the face of a hostile Roman Empire. Now, the demon Ben Thalamion also happens to have a very strange name. Already in the 1880s, Israel Levi demonstrated that the name Ben Thalamion is actually an Aramaicization, right? So it's an Aramaic version of the Greek name Bartholomew. In Christian tradition, Bartholomew has a special connection to demons. In the 4th century Greek composition, Questions or Gospel of Bartholomew, the resurrected Christ gives Bartholomew a full lecture on demonology. In a later text, Pseudo-Abdius, which was probably compiled in France in the late 6th or early 7th centuries, Bartholomew appears to have extraordinary abilities as an exorcist. According to Pseudo-Abdius, he tells a story where Bartholomew travels to an unnamed city. The local gods are demons who take possession of the people, making them sick and only agreeing to cure them in exchange for sacrifices. Bartholomew appears in the town and releases the people, including the daughter of Polemius the king, from demonic possession. The king is so grateful he offers gold and precious gift, but Bartholomew declines and says, "No, all I want is for you to learn about Christianity." Sound familiar? Now, the parallels between Bartholomew the exorcist in Pseudo-Abdius and Ben Thalamion the demon in the Babylonian Talmud are pretty obvious. Richard Kalman has argued that both stories are the result of writing down oral traditions circulating in the ancient Levant. Kalman argues that these traditions are based in part on the New Testament, which states explicitly that Jesus gave the 12 apostles authority over clean spirits to cast them out and to cure every disease and every sickness. But where the apostles gain authority by exorcising demons, the Babylonian rabbis gain authority by integrating demons into the rabbinic system. Demons become allies and accomplices of the rabbis. Bartholomew brings the kingdom of Polemius to true Christian faith. Ben Thalamion brings the kingdom of Rome to an understanding and acceptance of Judaism. And in so doing, He upholds the rabbis as the most effective and most appropriate leaders of the Jewish people. Now, it's worth noting just how weird this approach to demons is. Jews in the Second Temple period clearly believed that demons are evil and malevolent. We see this both in the apocryphal book of Tobit, which is all about a harmful demon attacking people who needs to be exorcised, and in perhaps some of the most famous Second Temple Jewish literature, which made its way into the New Testament. Jesus opposes evil demons, he exorcises demons all over the place. Closer in time to the rabbis, other Jews in Sasanian Babylonia clearly believed that demons are harmful outsiders too. The rabbis are only one group of Jews in this region in this period, and we have evidence for other Jews as well. There's a saying today, 2 Jews, 3 opinions. The exact same thing could be said in the world of the rabbis. So one group in late antique Babylonia dealt with the dangers that they saw in demons by producing Babylonian incantation bowls. These are bowls written in the same Aramaic that the Talmud is written in, and they have incantations written on the inside of the bowls. And then these bowls would have been ritually buried at the corners of somebody's home, usually buried upside down at the corners of somebody's home, almost functioning like demonic mouse traps. So they would say things like, "Oh, evil demons, I'm going to give you a list of all of the demons. You're the worst. Nobody likes you. Go away right now." That's my rough paraphrase. So clearly, other Jews in the same time and place as the rabbis believe that demons are evil and harmful. And yet the rabbis have taken a totally different approach, essentially neutralizing demonic danger by including demons in the rabbinic community. Now, by neutralizing demons through the law, the rabbis established themselves, the masters of the law, as those most qualified and capable of leading the Jewish people, demons included. They do so as part of a larger empire-wide demonic discourse, which created new opportunities for the construction of identity in conversation with other religious, linguistic, and ethnic groups. Demons become a shared point of terminology, as well as an opportunity for religious differentiation, both within the Jewish community and in interreligious contexts. And this religious differentiation should not really surprise us. The Zoroastrian rulers of the empire were dualistic. They understood demons as the malevolent creations of the evil god Ahriman. Christians at the time had a concept of a semi-independent or totally independent Satan working to oppose God's will. But the Jewish rabbis of Sasanian Babylonia were forced to integrate the demonic into a worldview in which only one God, and only one God, in one God and only one God, created both positive and negative forces in the world. So in dealing with demons, the rabbis have 3 theological options. Option 1, that God is somewhat evil and has evil minions. Option 2, that God is entirely good and demons are somehow evil beings outside of divine control. And I'm going to tell you right now, the rabbis do not take either of those approaches. Option 3, that God is good and God has created demons who are themselves, if not entirely good, then at the very least, not evil. The rabbis of the Babylonian choose this third option, of the Babylonian Talmud, excuse me. Demons were at worst capricious and dangerous when threatened, at best legal actors within the rabbinic system. And that's a move that is going to be adopted by the monotheistic Muslims who enter the region 150 years later. Now, hopefully, at this point, I've convinced you that the Babylonian rabbis clearly believed in demons. And not only that, but they integrated demons into their legal system and into their theology. Demons are all over the Babylonian Talmud, from the Passover Seder to the court of law to the synagogue. So in the rest of our time together, I want to shift gears and explore why so many people today don't know about how important demons were to ancient Judaism. So if demons are so important, why don't many Jews today believe in demons? First of all, let me be clear. Lots of Jews today do believe in demons, both within particular religious and ethnic communities and across them. Whenever I give a public talk about my book, I will tell you, I have never given a public talk about my book in person where at least one person didn't come up to me afterwards and tell me about their own encounter with forces that they describe as demonic. And that's true across denominations, across genders, and across ages. But to understand why so many Jews and non-Jews think that, of course, Jews don't believe in demons, we have to look at three particular moments in Jewish history: medieval North Africa, 19th century Germany, and 20th century America. So first, to the medieval Maghreb. The North African commentator, Rabbi Isaac Alfasi, who's known as the Rif, lived from 1013 to about 1103. Now, the Rif compiled an early code of Talmudic law that he called Sefer HaHalachot, the book of the Jewish law. To create his compilation, the Rif made a series of judgments about Talmudic passages, and he included only those that he determined were legal in nature and normative. That means that the Rif left out rabbinic stories and biblical interpretation because that wasn't necessary for his law code. But as we've already seen in Tractate Psachim and the discussion of the 4 cups of wine, actually demons show up in legal discussions as well. The Rif, however, chose to exclude from his law code even legal passages on topics he felt were non-normative, including demons. So he just took all of that stuff out. The Rif's approach was followed a generation by Maimonides. In his articulation of Jewish law, Maimonides expanded the Rif's outlook on demonic non-normativity into a broader moral stance, railing against superstitious people who are, and I'm quoting here because it's just that good, who are, quote, seduced by talismanry with great folly and with similar things, and think that they are real, which is not so. And these are things that have received great publicity among the pagans, especially among the nation which is called the Sabians. And they wrote work dealing with the stars and witchcraft and incantations and calling upon spirits and horoscopes and demons and soothsaying in all their forms. In his desire to cast rabbinic literature in a rationalist light, Maimonides explains that demons were really just people who were missing a rational soul. A so-called demon was just an animal in the form and likeness of a person, but with the power to cause all kinds of harm and innovate new evils, which other creations do not have. For Maimonides, then, the only real demons are irrational humans. Now, Maimonides is a foundational figure in Jewish thought and Jewish law, and so his rejection of the demonic had a huge impact, especially on Talmudic demonology. But the real crux of the rejection actually happened almost 1,000 years later in 19th century Germany. Judaism first became the subject of academic study, in universities, not in exclusively religious schools, in the 19th century. Now, the academic study of Judaism was spearheaded by a group called the Wissenschaft des Judentum, which translates to the scientific study of Judaism, a group of German Jewish scholars who insisted to the Jewish community and to the broader public that Judaism deserved to be studied in German universities. Their work was political, it was intellectual, and it was deeply theological. They made their case in part by presenting a Judaism that was just as rational and just as spiritual as Protestant Christianity. These scholars downplayed elements of Jewish tradition, the legal, the ritual, the quote-unquote irrational, that did not fit this 19th century German model of religion. Angels, demons, miracles, and popular religious practices were dismissed as primitive or as foreign and inauthentic to true Judaism. They might be present, but they're not really Jewish. In 1866, for example, the Hungarian rabbi and scholar Alexander Kohut described rabbinic demonology as, quote, an alien product obtained through contact with the Persians and the Medes in the exilic period. In 1893, German historian Heinrich Gretz echoed this approach. Gretz faulted the Talmud for containing, and I've put it up here so you can follow along, the various superstitious practices and views of the Talmud's Persian birthplace, which presume the efficacy of demoniacal medicines, of magic, incantations, miraculous cures, and interpretations of dream, and are thus in opposition to the spirit of Judaism. Now, these scholars dealt with what they saw as an irrational and primitive rabbinic demonology by dismissing it as a foreign corruption. They assumed that the rabbis must have included it in their sacred corpus, either because they had themselves been corrupted, or in order to placate the credulous common folk. And I want to be clear, I'm not actually criticizing them. The only reason that I was academically trained in ancient Judaism, and that you're all here right now, right, as part of Brite's program in the academic study of Judaism, is that over 150 years ago, the scholars of the Wissenschaft des Judentums were successful in making the case that Judaism was worthy of study in the secular academy. But their early rejection of rabbinic demonology set a course for modern scholarship that ignored the parts of Jewish tradition that have seemed primitive or awkward to 19th and 20th century readers. Now, it's also worth noting that the scholars of the Wissenschaft were right in terms of the timeline. Jewish demonology and angelology do start to show up primarily after the Babylonian exile. But they aren't simply imports or copy-pastes. The rabbis are doing some very creative and important, uniquely rabbinic things with them. And we miss those things if we don't take it seriously. Finally, we cannot overlook the role of anti-Semitism in framing the way that we today encounter Jewish texts. In the face of rising anti-Semitism in the 1930s and 1940s, American Jewish scholars like Joshua Trachtenberg worked explicitly to decouple demons from normative Judaism. This move was an important part of a critique and undoing of historical anti-Semitic tropes that associated Jews with demons, devil worship, and Satanism. In the face of Christian anti-Semitism, which associated Jews and demons, Trachtenberg pointed out just how dangerous this kind of biased association really was. Now, let me be clear. At no point has it just been Jews who believed in demons, good or bad. To think about our own contexts here, as Professor Feldman noted, I'm a professor at St. Mary's University, which is a Catholic and Marianist university. Brite Divinity School offers a number of Christian denominational programs as well as Jewish studies. The Catholic Church still offers today what the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops calls a major exorcism, which is directed at, quote, the expulsion of demons or the liberation of a person from demonic possession. Now, because the exorcists of the Catholic Church are committed to confidentiality, I don't have numbers on how common this is. But every diocese in the United States is charged with developing a protocol for offering and performing exorcisms. Numerous Protestant Christian denominations, including those who have programs at Brite, also have active beliefs in demons and offer spiritual healing and exorcism as part of their pastoral work. Jews have never been the only ones who believed that demons were real or integrated demons into their understanding of the world and their place in it. There is no exclusive association of demons and Jews outside the fevered imaginings of anti-Semites. But anti-Semitism is real and has real consequences. It makes sense that in the 1940s, Jewish studies scholars would work to be extra careful when talking about Jews and demons. Unfortunately, we know from history that these moves didn't work. The same Germany, which was the heart of the Wissenschaft des Judentums, became the locus for the Holocaust. And so, though I completely understand the impulse, letting anti-Semites define Judaism or Jewish studies ultimately doesn't work. So then, do Jews believe in demons? Some do, some don't. But the rabbis of the Talmud absolutely did, just like everyone else around them. But regardless of one's personal beliefs, the idea of demons is an important way for us to understand how ancient Jews and some modern Jews thought and continue to think about the big questions of their universe: the nature of God, what it means to be a Jew in a world where Jews are a minority and where they can't always trust the government. The same great minds who developed the laws and rituals of the Sabbath and the holidays, the Passover Seder that we still observe today, thought seriously about what to eat and how to write contracts and how to connect with God, who spend a lot of time creating this profound ethic of care for each other in a hostile world. Those same great minds also spent a lot of time thinking about demons. And we need to take that seriously. Thank you. So I think I've left quite a chunk of time for a conversation. But let me stop share so that I can. There.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Professor Ronis. We all enjoyed listening to you. 38 of us are here with you. And we have a few questions that are streaming in. So let's start with the basic one. Did God create demons? And what's the difference between demons, devil, and Lucifer? That's a lot.
Excellent. So for the rabbis tell three different stories about demonic origins. One thing to know about the rabbis, and I said this at the beginning when I was talking about the Talmud, one thing to know is that the Talmud is multivocal. It is authored by a group of people over about 300 years, and it offers a diversity of opinions. My Christian students are always frustrated. They want to know, what's the right answer? And to be fair, most of them are Catholic, and they sort of are trained to look at the Pope. That's not quite how the Talmud works. So the Talmud tells us three different stories about where demons come from. The first story is that demons are the product of some kind of sin, usually something around Adam and Eve after the garden. So there's some sort of sin which occurs, which leads to the production of demons. That's one story. A second story is that demons are a product of what we might look at and think of as evolution, that sort of snakes evolve into demons over a long period of time in the rabbinic imagination. If I have any evolutionary biologists in the room, you'll note that seems unlikely, but you know, I certainly appreciate the imagination. The third story, and this is the one that I think is actually most prominent in rabbinic literature, is that God created demons as part of God's creation. Right? If God created everything in the world, then God created demons as well. Most discussions in the Talmud refer to demons being created on the sixth day. There's one wonderful story where God creates demons on the sixth day, and he creates their spirits, but the sixth day is Friday, and the sun is setting, and Shabbat is coming, and God runs out of time, and so they are stuck as spirits without bodies. So again, I'll note, from a theological perspective, right, if you believe, and the rabbis do, that God is the creator of everything, then that everything has to include demons. Now, the devil and demons are not the same thing for the rabbis. The rabbis actually never talk about the devil or Satan and demons in the same conversation. And anyone here who's read early Christian literature, you know that Satan and demons are constantly associated with each other. So that's a real difference that we're seeing here. But it's almost like the rabbis think about the big world of intermediary beings, right? Things that are between God and humans. That big world has a lot of diversity in it. Different species with different, right? So there's angels and demons and an evil eye and maybe some Satans, and all of those have their own physiology and their own purpose in God's creation.
Thank you very much. That was very helpful. So a question of a different kind. Would you say that demons can only take things that have no owner to them? And how does this help us navigate our own place in this world? If we are owned by God, Jesus, divine, are we more susceptible, less susceptible to demonic influence?
Yes. So, you know, one of the things that the rabbis think, so first of all, let me just say the rabbis will never think that we are owned by Jesus, right? They're really important just to understand different religious communities have different understandings of what a divine being is and how that divine being relates to us. In the Talmud, they're actually talking about really specifically things that are ownerless, that are found on the street. So, you know, somebody drops a tenner, or you find some nickels on the ground. That's what they're talking about there. Now, what I love about this question, though, is I think it continues to challenge us to think, okay, but what can we learn today? Whether or not we believe in demons, what can we learn about this today? And, you know, I think the rabbis have a lot to teach us about responsibility to ourselves and our belongings, right? What does it mean to be ownerless, and who is ownerless, and who is susceptible to harm in various ways, and how do we maybe empower people to own themselves, as you know, outside of a religious framework or within a religious framework. I think there's a lot to offer there. But I appreciate this question because you're right. It reminds us to keep asking. You know, this is fascinating on an intellectual level as we study the past, but we always want to come back to what are the things that we can learn from this? And I think we can learn a lot from it. Absolutely.
Thank you. And on the same sort of wave, would you say that you personally believe in demons?
That is a great question. So here's what I'm going to say. I believe that demons are real. But what I mean by that is probably not what you think. What I mean by demons are real is that demons are real to a lot of different communities, and they do real work in helping communities and individuals think about their relationship to God, to each other, to what it means to be good or to sin. Demons do a lot of really real work in the world in the ways that people think about ourselves and our relationships. Does that mean that there are actually physical beings who are out there who, you know, are sitting under water spouts invisible? I don't know. I've never seen one. Maybe that's by design because they're invisible. But I think sometimes we ask the question, is something real? And our association is, because if it isn't, I'm going to dismiss it. It's not important. And I think I want to challenge us to say, even if something isn't real to me and it's real to other people, how do I take that seriously? How do I learn from other people and what is real to them, even if I don't get it? Because if I want to learn about other people, whether they're people in the past or whether it's, you know, my neighbors here right now, I have to be able to empathize with where they're coming from and say, all right, I assume you're smart and thoughtful people of principle, right? My assumption about people in the world is that people are smart and thoughtful until proven otherwise. So why do smart and thoughtful people take this seriously? And what can I learn about them when I enter into their imaginative space, right? Into their belief system.
Thank you. And this actually leads us to a different question. How do you think demons and beliefs in demons play in the world of charismatic world of Christian churches, for instance, some Christian denominations? Can we say that demons in any way are a cause of mental illness, physical illness, etc.?
Yes. So there's a wonderful subspecialty of psychology and psychiatry called ethnopsychiatry. Now, ethnopsychiatry emerged in the 50s and in the 1950s and 1960s, primarily in France, when psychiatrists noticed that people were coming to them with diagnosable mental illness who were being treated by medication and therapy, right? So modern scientific interventions were working to treat the symptoms of whatever they were presenting with. But some of these people were coming from communities that saw them as demon possessed. And your symptoms can go away, but if you and your community still believe that you are possessed by a demon, then you're not actually healed, right? If you still see yourself as sick and your community will not reintegrate you because you are dangerous, right, in their understanding, then I can give you all the Prozac in the world and I haven't actually solved your problem. So ethnopsychiatry emerged as a collaboration between religious communities and psychiatry to work in partnership to offer healing to people who experience something that presents as demon possession. Now, in charismatic churches today, there are absolutely both beliefs in demon possession and in possession by the Spirit, right? So you've got speaking in tongues, you've got spirit possession, which is positive, and you've got spirit possession, which is negative. The line between that and mental illness, I don't know. I will say the Catholic Church, which again is my teaching context here, has an extensive set before anyone is trained as an exorcist. They are extensively trained on first determining that whatever is presenting is not a diagnosable mental illness. So again, I think where there's the most opportunity for healing, whatever that looks like, is to take seriously what it is that communities believe, right? Because you can give somebody medication that will cure symptoms, or at least treat symptoms. But if they in their community don't see them as healed, you have not fixed the problem. And they have not fixed their problem. And so really thinking about how do we take seriously all that the scientific world has to offer, while also taking seriously what people know and believe to be true in their hearts and souls and communities.
Thank you. So thinking about ancient rabbis who seems from time to time, some of them at least, to use demonic help, was it some sort of transaction? Did the demons expect anything in return for their services?
We don't have a sense of transaction. We have more of a sense of is demons who really like to learn Torah, and rabbis who like to teach Torah. And so we have descriptions of, and again, I looking at the room, I imagine many people here have gone to some kind of academic conference or professional conference in your own profession. And we have descriptions of the rabbis going to their own big rabbinic conference, and the room is packed. And part of why it's so full is because all the demons come, right? And why do they come? Because they like learning Torah and they want to study too, right? If Joseph the demon can teach, then of course demons can be students. So I think we have a sense that the demonic world, it's not like you have to necessarily go find a demon and catch them and have a transaction of some kind. It's not Pokemon. What it is living in community. But they have this picture of a community which is perhaps more diverse than we can imagine, right? We today talk a lot about diversity, but when we're talking about diversity, we're often talking about visible diversities. And I think we should be. I'm not critiquing that in any way. The rabbis, when they're talking about diversity in their communities, are also imagining a diversity where not all the members of their community are even visible. Right? And what does it mean to be in communication, to be in community with people you can't see? And I think that becomes a real challenge for all of us, right? It's a real challenge to learn how to see. Going back to the original question somebody had asked about, how does this matter to us today? What does it mean to be in community with people who we either can't see, or we don't see, or we won't see? And how do we grow our understanding of community beyond the sort of obvious, members?
Thank you very much. And continuing on that line of thought, are demons considered liminal forces or beings? And if so, what insight might the liminality provide around theological anthropology today for us as we think about the divine?
I do think of them as liminal forces. Yes, I think that they, and liminal in a number of ways. Liminal in the sense of between God and us. Liminal in the sense of they have a lot of powers, but it seems somewhat capricious. So being around them might be a little bit like walking on eggshells a lot of the time, because as we already saw, they can get pretty offended if you do things like drink an even number of cups of wine, which I don't personally find offensive, but you got to take seriously other people's pet peeves. So I do think of them very much as liminal forces. I'll also note that they're liminal forces in other ways as well. And here I'm moving more into later Jewish belief, where even today, many Jewish communities have beliefs that times of marriage and pregnancy are particularly fraught, and particularly dangerous. And so at these big life transition moments, you see people still using amulets and other kinds of protective forces to ensure healthy transition in those liminal states.
Thank you. Would you say that demons could be partially good? Or are there any signs of folks believing within Jewish circles that demons are doing something good as beings, as creations?
Absolutely. I think when we look at demons like Joseph the demon, who's a teacher, we would say he's definitely good. Right? I mean, what's better than being a teacher of Torah if you yourself are a student of Torah? So I think demons are a lot like people for the rabbis. What I mean by that is we've got good ones. We have ones who have made bad choices. And then most people are kind of neutral. And if you're nice to them, they'll be nice to you. And if you are, rude and unpleasant and put things on top of their ears, then they will also not like you, right? In one of the famous cases in the Talmud, a demon attacks somebody after a gentleman walking home from a pub urinates on him. And I'm like, yeah, that checks out. I would also not enjoy if some drunk person walked by and decided to, relieve themselves upon me. So I think for the rabbis, it's not as simple as saying good or bad. I think it's, and this isn't just me being dismissive. I think it's much more messy for them because demons are, again, going back to the R word, right? Real. To be real also means not to be ideal necessarily, right? To be real in all the messiness of realness.
Thank you. And maybe one more.
Okay.
Do you think the subversive beliefs of the rabbis somehow explain the demonization of Judaism by Christians later on? And one more here. And also affect by contradiction the Christian understanding of demonology?
I absolutely don't think that these beliefs affect Christian anti-Semitism. I think Christians are anti-Semitic in the medieval period and the early modern period for all kinds of reasons. Demons are not listed as one of them for the most part. We know of very rich, extensive Christian demonologies at the time. I think there are lots of theological reasons why Christians in the medieval period are anti-Jewish. I think there are lots of economic reasons that incentivize anti-Judaism. So I think there's lots of things going on. I really don't think demons are the reason. On the other hand, if you already hate Jews and you're looking for more reasons to hate Jews, it's easy to, create the longest list you possibly can. And demons might be on that list. Obviously, we here today are excited to learn more about Judaism. We are aware of the profound dangers, physical, theological, political, of unchecked anti-Semitism. And I think we are better for it. We always have work to do in fighting discrimination, but I think we are better for it. But I take seriously that in the 1930s and 40s, as people were looking at Hitler's rise to power, they were trying to downplay that. Absolutely. One of the things that I hope we can learn from this, and this is one of the reasons I was so excited to speak at Brite, is because one of the things I want us to understand is the way that a belief in demons can actually be a shared point of conversation, right, among Jews and Christians and Zoroastrians in the ancient world, and perhaps also today. And again, conversation doesn't mean we all have to agree, but it does mean learning to listen to each other, learning to see why smart and thoughtful people with different beliefs come to different conclusions. To some extent, the study of demons is the study of empathy about things that we don't quite understand. And that is a skill I think we all could do more to develop.
Thank you very, very much, Professor Ronis, for your wonderful presentation, for taking our questions. Special thanks go to Vanessa Daly and Lauren Baxter, who take such a great care of this program and all the other programs we're providing through this Cristol series of lectures. Please stay tuned for forthcoming Cristol lectures that we will have this semester and the next semester. And for now, thanks again to all of you and goodbye. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.